Hello, everybody. I'm just going to give this maybe one more minute to let a few more people get here before we start. All right, I think we can get going now. So thank you all for joining us tonight for this talk from our resident AH, Jerriod Avant. My name is Kristen Hill, and I'm the Cultural Sites Program Coordinator for the James Castle House. I'm here tonight with Lavona Andrews, who will be providing ASL interpretation for the event, and of course with our fantastic residents. So Jerriod has had a pretty unusual experience here so far. He's been here for about 2 weeks and has just finished up a quarantine period. So this is his first virtual event with us here, and we're really excited to have this tonight. And also we will have a few other virtual events with him, including some inside the studio events where it's essentially an open studio. You get to have a little bit more of an intimate conversation in a small group setting. And then we will also have a final presentation from him at the end of his stay. We hope that you can all come back for those. So I just want to start off by thanking the City of Boise for the ongoing support to the James Castle House and the Arts and History Department for the work that we are doing here. So the James Castle House is a program of the Arts and History Department, which offers many other services, including public art, history programs, archives, cultural grants, and care and conservation. So the James Castle House celebrates the life and work of American artist James Castle through exhibitions, community programs, research, and conservation of Castle's historic shed and trailer where he lived and worked for over 4 decades. So the site today is on land that we need to acknowledge the broader history of, which is the ancestral, cultural, traditional, and unceded territory of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute people. All right. So, rooted in history and place, the James Castle House hosts an ongoing residency program supporting other artists' lives and creative works. The residency program began in 2018 and has hosted 6 10-week residents and 5 short stay residents over the past 2 years. So along with the residency programs, the James Castle House also presents exhibitions where visitors can see James Castle original artworks and learn about Castle, the family, and the history of the neighborhood. These events are currently being held online. They're all being held virtually. So please join us for those events so you can see as much as you can from a distance. Tonight we're going to strongly encourage your participation and engagement. And at the end of this event, after Jerriod is finished with his presentation, we're going to have a question and answer period. So feel free to, as we're going along with this presentation, write your thoughts down, like jot them down in a notebook or put them down in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, I will pass those on to Jerriod and he will answer as many of them as we can get to. And also one more thing before we do that, take a look at the name that is showing on your Zoom screen. And if there is a different name that you want to be called by, please change it now. You can go up to the little 3 dots in the right-hand corner of your name and select rename. So now on to the main event. So A.H. Jerriod Avant is a poet whose work focuses on place and memory, featuring aspects of the landscapes in which he created them. Originally from Longtown, Mississippi, Jerriod is a graduate of Jackson State University and has earned MFA degrees from Spalding University and New York University. His poems have appeared in the Mississippi Review, Boston Review, Pinwheel, Ecotone, Callaloo, the Baffler, LARB Quarterly, and other journals. He's currently a doctoral English student and instructor of record at the University of Rhode Island. So please welcome Jerriod Avant.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and everybody at the Boise City Department of Arts and History, everybody interested in and associated with the James Castle House. Thank you so much. I am going to go away from Boise for a little bit. I'll take us to Longtown, Mississippi, or Panola County, Mississippi, and some other Delta counties, Red Clay Hill counties, where most of my life has benefited from, or I've benefited from these places in both the photos I make and the language that I use to make poems. So these, I guess the first half of these photos are gonna be from Mississippi and from a trip that I made to Mississippi back in September of last year. There's so many things I could list to say that are some of my favorite parts about being from Mississippi and about being from a place like this. But I think up top of that list is the kudzu vine. You know, it's a pest. It's everywhere. It shows up, you know, in places that it doesn't need to show up. It's hard to kill. It's persistent. It's easy to get tangled up in. And, you know, the order of operations for it is to simply suffocate, which ends up being analogous with the humidity that we get in Mississippi during the deep summer, which brings me to a second characteristic that I love and also struggle with, you know, the humidity. But I often find that it shows up in my work in ways that that inform either the tone or the structure of what it is I'm writing or trying to say. Some of these photos are taken on the road that we grew up on, or that I grew up on, my family. These cows are some of the neighbors' cows, and whenever I'm sort of out, I always try and spend time with the animals that seem safe to spend time with, you know. I don't go looking for trouble, but I'm always interested in the patience of animals when I'm trying to photograph them. I found that, you know, not being in a rush and taking my time tends to yield a better photograph, as I'm not making any sudden moves, so to speak. But I found quite the relationship with these farm animals, mostly cows and horses. And these are all in Longtown, which is a small town in Panola County. Our home address is Crenshaw, Mississippi, but we live in Longtown, which is about 7 miles from Crenshaw. Longtown doesn't have a post office box, so it's that remote of a place. Trees are another huge or important sort of landmark or plant that I tend to focus on in my photography, in the photos that I make. These are trees surrounding my elementary school playground. And I guess when you're there in the summer, you know, there's so many rich greens. Everything is so lush, and I don't don't know, I feel like the colors the photographs you render sometimes um, end up showing up in my work, in my poetry, and to bring either inanimate things to life or enliven things that appear not to have so much life. It's strange when sometimes I'm riding roads with my mother, and we'll be riding through the Delta and come across fields like this, where here, if you're familiar with crops at all, the strangeness of seeing um, these corn stalks in the middle of what I think is a soybean field. Uh, but what that tells us is that, they grew corn in this field last year, and they often preserve the field by switching the crop. Um, and I love these fields. I'm intrigued by the history of the hands, the Black hands who worked these fields, who, in the mid to late 20th century, got pushed out of the industrialization of agriculture. So Black farmers going from, there were, I guess, about a million, about a million Black farmers in 1920, and that number dwindled systematically, and there were barely 100,000 Black farmers when we get to 1960, 1965. And so I kind of walk around when I'm home, and I don't know, I kind of walk around like I own the fields. Like I don't know, I feel a kind of right to them because of all the work that was done on them by Black people. Um, these next, I guess, 10 or 14 photos are um, an obsession, I guess. Um, when I'm out, I'm always looking for patterns. I'm always looking for patterns in my poetry, uh, new patterns, fresh patterns, things that um, seem interesting to me. And so here is a set of photos where I found either vehicles, uh, service vehicles, personal automobiles, houses, buildings, structures that have died or that have been taken over by plant life or otherwise abandoned. And these, to me, feel like um, shards of life, of shards of, of, of images that carry a very similar kind of tone. Um, these are still Mississippi. It's almost as I feel like I'm choosing the pieces I engage with that have their own, precious little gift, their own history, uh, uses, ways of being in the world. Um, and turn to I turn to language for those same sort of qualities, especially the language that I grew up around, um, the speech that I was um, lucky enough to be so close to. I think thinking about this photo, obviously it's a house, and we recognize it as a house because of the structures that we're used to seeing: the front door, the pointed roof, the screens. But other than those things that have been maintained here, I love how this shade of pink has um, maintained its brilliance, you know, in spite of everything that we see that we could call wrong with this structure. And these black and whites are more landscape. Um, these are these are um, old sharecropping houses in Money, Mississippi, uh, just off the edge of a cornfield. I love the. I guess I'm interested in also interested in the mystery behind abandoned structures, abandoned objects. Uh, I spend a lot of time, you know, imagining what those histories are, and and how those histories feed into the ways I walk and engage the world. Here's another kudzu. We're going to get into some more kudzu, and this was in our backyard. I'm I'm really interested in danger, you know, natural dangers, um, you know, running into venomous snakes or animals that can do serious harm, or just being out in nature and sort of not being prepared. Um, but this photo I see, there's a face emerging from this kudzu, and I imagine this to be an eye, and this to be an eye, and this to be some kind of twisted mouth, and this is perhaps a chin or a lip. Um, if you look at enough kudzu, you'll see it start to form shapes in your head, um, much like clouds do. You know, I remember being little and imagining seeing you know resemblances of animals in the shapes of clouds. Um, and now when I'm in Mississippi, I'm always looking to the kudzu to reveal something. um, Another one of I guess my favorite things, um, or landmarks or plants uh, from this part of the state is the river cane. You can't tell in this photo because there's nothing to scale it against. But these stalks of river cane are about the tallest ones are about 17 and a half feet high. Um, but they just look like brush that you could easily pull up with your hands from the road from about 50 yards away. But once you get up on them, they're deceptive in how tall and massive and thick and tough that they are. More river cane. This is in Money, Mississippi. This silo um, in the middle of a cotton field is you know, being suffocated by kudzu vine. This is a trail behind or path behind the house that I grew up in. I love how it feels like a portal. How it feels like you know you might be going into a different place, a different world, um, and it feels like that when I think about the way I've sort of chosen these parts of the landscape in the Delta and the Red Clay Hills to capture. This is from the top of a hill. I walked past this tree in the center along here to get up this hill for this view. And as you can see, it's just kudzu for as far as you can see. You can barely see the shapes of any of the trees because of the kudzu. And here we see the vine intertwining itself with itself. And of course, the rivers are often our, I guess, the go-to bodies of water, rivers and lakes this far north in Mississippi. This is the Tallahatchie River in Miami, Mississippi. I included this photo because I believe, I believe this photo is possibly trying to rethink or put a spin on the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. I saw these crosses and I was like, wait a minute. Jesus' cross is not in the middle. But I liked it. I liked the disorder of it, the confusion of it. And so those are some of, I guess, my favorite places to be in Mississippi. Some of my favorite things to look for in nature when I'm out. And I tend to look for some of those same things, wherever I go. I'm always interested in the landscape that way. And so here's one of the first photos I've taken since I've been here in Boise. Up the road for me is, two doors down is a neighbor, and these are some of his horses that he allowed me to take pictures of. Some of these are before he allowed me to take pictures because I was just walking along the street. But I don't know, it's always important for me to find and make friends with the animals, and it's also, it's just about all we can do now during the pandemic. But I'm glad I was doing this before now. So it's not a job. It feels familiar. It feels as if I was home and visiting the same animals that I was there. So these are some of the foothills here near Callaloo. And I've made 2 hikes on these foothills since I've been here. The first Saturday I was here and this past Saturday. And so here's my story. This was my second hike this past Saturday. And I left the house about 7:30. And I got there right after sunrise. So the light hadn't, I was anxious to photograph, all the shadowy intersecting foothills for all of those qualities. And the big sky, which we also get in the Delta, in that alluvial plain. And so I had committed to shoot a number of rolls of film before I came home, so I prepared to be gone. I got there in the middle of sunrise, and the light was curtaining its way down the peak, down the half, and then the bottom of the most east-facing hills. I saw what appeared to be grandfather and a grandson on mountain bikes. Then there was what could have been 2 middle-aged women, maybe sisters, maybe friends. There was a seasoned outdoorsman backpack strapped tight, and with that backpack bulge, his walking stick and his canine at his side. Then a young man and his dog, a family of four. The last person I saw was actually at this intersection right here. I'm standing at before the fork, and you're looking at the left turn, and to the right out of the frame is the right turn. And so he was with his dog, and this was the last fork that I chose to take photographs at. And there's 6 forks in the polk at Loop Trail, right? And so I was so preoccupied, I felt, with making the photographs that I made this left at this fork when I should have made the right. I wouldn't realize this until almost a mile later, when my surroundings grew more and more unrecognizable. My time was telling me that I should have descended, but I wasn't. I was looking for a portion of the descent that had me on a trail that hung off the right side of one of the hills, but never found it. It got muddy and muddier the further I went, and I definitely didn't recognize this from my previous hike. Because mud's a no-go for the hiking trails. And sometimes when you're lost, you see things that you think you recognize, but you don't recognize, but then you see things that you definitely don't recognize. And so I was struggling there for a minute. So at this point, I'm lost. I realize I'm lost, mad, but glad that I did pack snacks. I had 2 bananas and some pistachios and a good amount of water left in my bottle. So I was surely lost. There were moments where I felt I recognized what I saw, and I believe that kept me moving through the worsening mud. I didn't remember any rain, but I did discover that there are hills on the other side of North Cartwright Road, which likely hindered the amount of sun that side of Polk at Loop gets. I wouldn't take another photo out of frustration. Surely I had made the wrong turn after checking my GPS, which assured me I was headed to the trailhead and parking lot. It was indeed the opposite trailhead and parking lot near North Cartwright Road. It was at that point that I rediscovered that I was still lost and very lost. So it cost me 10 more miles between North Cartwright Road, North Bogus Basin Road, and Hill Road until I was home. And so this feeling of being lost, I think the sensation that I'm getting at here is, part being able to be okay with being lost when you have prepared for the event that you lose. Some of these, I wouldn't have seen this photo had I not gotten lost, had I not gone down that left turn in the fork. I also discovered on my walk down North Cartwright Road that there are these holes in the side of the foothills that badgers dig. I looked it up when I got home. I thought it was fascinating. I mean, there were like every maybe 100 feet, there was a hole dug into the side of the foothills. At one point, I saw a group of deer, a group of white-tailed deer, sort of diving through a trail on the foothills, and it was, I don't know, it made me feel really, really alive in a strange way, in a way that I love to be made to feel alive when I'm in nature, being, not in wildlife's way, but being able to respectfully share that space and that energy has always been good for me. I've taken a few photos in the city on walks, and Boise has some really good signage. some really old school signage, and some good. I'm really interested in, you know, in the way language falls apart in my work. Um, how do, make use of the shards that are left, after things are falling apart. And, and so these are the photos. Right. And so I guess in the poems that I've been focused on lately, um, that definitely get energy and are informed by these photos, by making these photos. I've sort of delighted myself in playing around with what I'm calling these shards of language, and milking words and phrases for their sonic values while stringing them into a notion of coherence, but always privileging the sonics. Um, I think this is probably the most fun I've had making poems uh, recently. Writing poems is usually a chore. Uh, or a lot of times it's a chore. It feels like a chore. Um, it's not always pleasant. And so I think I've sort of found a groove of pleasure uh, in these poems that I'm writing right now. And so for me, this has made the relationships between parts of English speech collide in weird and interesting ways. I love when I get stuck or lost, when I keep running into impossibilities because there's no verb that rhymes with or has the same consonant vowel, consonant structure as a word like every. It's fun to feel and watch what I've put together emerge in sonically satisfying ways. It stretches my thinking about the limitations of language while also throwing in a bit of discovery, some question, opinion, or even skepticism from someone like me and my relationship, my Black Mississippi Delta Clay Hill relationship, to a world where I find discomfort readier for me than comfort. And so that is the end of my slideshow.
Those are amazing, Jerriod. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Are you ready to open things up to question and answer at this point? Or do you have more that you would like to present?
Yeah, question and answer is fine. Um, yeah.
Do you have poems that you want to share?
I got some poems. Yeah, I'll read some poems.
That would be wonderful.
I'll read a couple of poems. All right, this is a poem that definitely grew out of time I spent in um, those fields and forests of kudzu near lakes um, in the dead heat of summer there in Mississippi. And this is called For the Summer. Docked at a lake that the people don't attend. Machete on my hip to make a devil cough up blood, dust, and light. Hungry for ruins of an afternoon of anything wild and willing to stick its neck through the roof of the leftover lake. I'm docked at a lake that ain't got no river, in a field that ain't got no fence, under a sun that ain't never heard of mercy. I'm docked at the edge of an unfortunate dinner next to a wet knot of cottonmouths, too big to see. I'll also read a couple of poems that have sort of led me to where I am thinking now about language and about sound and how my how I feel right now. My goal is to take these pieces of meaning and strew together or sew together new pieces of meaning. And this poem sort of exploits a rule of language. The title of it is Felonious States of Adjectival Excess, featuring comparative and superlative forms. My mo favoriter and mo better is my most favoritist. It's more simpler this way. It's more fluider, more wetter, most hottest, that's the most beautifulest, is more beautifully, more mean, more fly, and most flyest, most shyer, and the most shyest is more than more intelligenter than the panels is most ugliest and most selectivist. It's the most goodest. It's the most burntest. It's more burnter. And more unrulier, it's the most meekest, and even more meeker, it's the most ownablest. It's more purchasable. And the most purchased, thus, becomes the most purchasablest at the sight of the most shiniest corns. My most funkiest is also my most stolenest, but the most stolenest can't ever be more funkier than the most oldest. The most thievinest be the most brokenest. That's the most thieved from be the most oldest. So becomes the most richest, who also be the most fundedest. And that makes me the most confusedest. When I'm in the most keptest buildings that be more kepter than all the most time keeping his cats, they keep in the back of keeping. Maybe I should stop there.
Did you say maybe that's it?
Maybe.
I mean, you can keep going. You're getting great responses. So.
Let's see. Oh. Okay. Okay, I'll read what I'm calling these. I'm calling these sound tunnels. Um, I guess the group of them I'm calling love letters to the auditory cortex. These poems um, are in stanzas and intersets, 3-line stanzas, and so the structure of these, and these are the poems that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be working on here, and so the shards of language, the logic is in the sound of these sentences. And so there's a grounding sentence that repeats back to back in the middle of these poems. There are only 6 different lines, but there are 12 lines total. The first 6 lines reverse themselves in an attempt to create an echo effect, and to also sort of see what meaning can be found, when these sentences are rearranged. But the only other ruling principle of these is that there's a grounding sentence, and every other sentence in the poem only uses the vowels in the grounding sentence. And so, sometimes I can't find color that rhymes with bush, or I can't find a noun with 3 syllables that rhymes or has the same consonant vowel consonant structure as a different word. All right, so I'll read it and then I'll share what these look like on the screen. This one's called Not a Song for You. Red towers take licks, wrong man off. Dead showers, naked strong ran off. Shared hours, rated zones can off. Dead hours take a long bang halt. Shit. Flowers make it belong hang loft. Isn't Powers his favorite song sang off? Isn't Powers his favorite song sang soft? Shit. Flowers make it belong hang loft. Dead hours take it long bang halt. Shared hours rated zones can off. Dead showers naked strong ran off. Red towers take licks wrong man off. So that's the sound tunnel.
That's incredible. Did you say you're going to show what it looks like?
Oh, yes, this is, I'm sorry. So these, right, and so of course these poems sort of risk a kind of incoherence, but I am fascinated by the sound, by the logic, the feel of the tone that we get from sort of replicating the vowel structure of a sentence. It feels musical. At my core, before I started writing, I played trombone and tuba from 4th grade. I played trombone to 7th grade, and then from 8th grade all through too many years of undergrad, I played tuba and sousaphone. My brothers played musical instruments. My dad sang in a gospel quartet. So music's always been a driving force, and so it makes sense to me that I'm taking these shards and I guess appreciating the music found in language that a lot of times doesn't make any grammatical sense, but really privileging the sound that comes from replicating these vowel structures. So that's what they look like. Some of these go faster than others, but it's really fun. And so the first sentence in this and this particular one isn't Powers' favorite song, sang soft. And so from there, I worked my way down to the next sentence and the next sentence, and then they just mirror themselves from the center. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's even, it's even aesthetically beautiful, that form.
Yeah, they're fun. They're a lot of fun.
Thanks for sharing some poems with us. I think it would have been sad without that. So thank you. Are you ready to take a few questions? We've got a bunch for you at this point. So.
Oh my God.
Are you geared up?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So Mackenzie Dunstan asks, she says, such beautiful photographs. Can you tell us more about how your photos inform your poetry and writing process? Do you ever look back at them while you're writing?
Sometimes I look back at them when I'm writing. I think I look at them most when I'm editing or in the post-processing stage of, deciding that a photo is done. But a lot of the same, I guess, editing or revision principles that I use in poetry, I use in photography. In making a photograph, you're always deciding what is in focus, what's out of focus, what's in the foreground, the tone of the color in the photo. And so I'm always sort of reminded of that when I'm thinking about the tone of a voice in a poem, or, uh, or the framing, the structure, the environment, the landscape of a poem. I'm thinking about in these, obviously I'm privileging the sonic landscape for these poems. And so I'm always going back and forth between the two, and recognizing those resemblances in the editing and revision process.
Great, thank you. All right, we've got a question from Lanier Avant. You drew great parallels between Longtown and Boise. As much as the two places may be demographically different, how striking have you found the similarities?
That's my brother. um, how striking have I found the similarities? I don't know. Like I don't. I feel like I saw a sign. I was walking down State Street the other day, and I saw a sign at what looked like a bar named Terry's on State Street, and the sign said, 2020 has a virus, uninstall it. And back home, there's a muffler shop on Highway 6. I think it's a Republican muffler shop, and but they have the funniest signs. I remember taking a picture of one of the signs that said, it quotes loosely this phrase from um, this movie I don't recommend called The Help. Um, but it said, but in The Help, I think she tells the little girl, you is smart, you is kind, you is intelligent. But the sign at the muffler shop said, Mississippi, you is hot, you is humid, you is something, And so they always have, some kind of funny, colloquial language up on their signs. And so seeing that kind of personality come through in the signage here in Boise, it was striking. It's probably one of the most striking resemblances that I've noticed so far. I mean, granted, I've only been here 2 weeks and only been outside so much. So but I expect there to be more. There must be.
I hope so. Rachel Reichert asks, what does your process look like? Do you have any rituals, actions, or anything like that that help you get started when writing a poem or even starting off a residency in an unfamiliar place?
Well, part of that for me is going outside. Um, I do a lot of writing out in the woods. Uh, because usually when I'm writing, I'm saying things out loud and I'm putting things in the air, and it's safer to do that in a place like the woods than, most of the public places. Um, but I also love, you know, having access to all that air, to feel that air and hear what things are doing sonically. And so going to the woods it's been it's been my juice for a long time. I believe in it, and once I've got that starter phrase sounding the way I want it to sound, I'll commit it to paper and get a draft down. And, once I'm there, I can throw it on the computer and flip things around easily. Um, so yeah, I think like being in the woods, being in some kind of solitude, helps me be able to hear.
This is my question, but did getting lost in the foothills kind of do what going to the woods normally would do?
It did. It gave me, I was in a very strange, different, new place. I didn't have I still don't have my bearings, but I know Collinsville well now. So, it helped familiarize myself with the area, um, and it did have me thinking about being able to be lost in the work and appreciate those things that being lost can give us.
All right, we've got a question from Katie Young. What's surfacing that surprised you from the use of these formal structures?
Um, I think probably how flexible the language is, or how much room there is to, you know, carry meaning outside of the, I guess, expected or right grammatical structures. Just hearing, I think hearing, whenever you can you can write down a list of words that don't make any grammatical sense, but carry a kind of tone. Um, and and I think I'm surprised at how available that is, or how fruitful that place has been.
All right, we are almost out of time here. I guess we can continue to answer questions if you're interested, but I would like to, for anyone who's got a tight schedule, I would just like to thank everyone so much for coming tonight. And thank you so much, Jerriod, for sharing. It was incredible. I'm really looking forward to seeing the work that you make here and hearing about your experience in Boise. And thank you, Livona, so much for interpreting tonight. So Livona has worked with us since basically we opened the James Castle House in 2018, and we are always so excited to have another opportunity to work with her. Very excited to see you. And then to anyone who's here tonight, just we're really hopeful that you will be able to join us for future events. As I mentioned before, Jerriod will be having different virtual events moving forward. We've got a few inside the studio events as well as a final presentation. So all of these events can be found on our website at jamescastlehouse.org. But just to make things a little bit easier, I'm just gonna hurry and pop the link to our events page in the chats here. So I will put that in there, and if anyone has other questions, feel free to keep them coming. And if you need to go, then thank you for joining. I have one question for you, Jerriod.
Okay.
Okay, so you talk about geography, landscapes in different places really informing the work that you're doing. And you've talked about the importance of sort of privileging sound quality in the work that you're making. And it sounds like you talk a lot about sound in terms of like language and music, but do you also take inspiration from like environmental sounds in a place? Does that become a part of your process?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, you know, in terms of like when I think about memory and I think about these places where I love to be, there are definitely sounds that take me back there, that help sort of conjure memories that I may be trying to work into a poem. The same way that, you know, our memory when we hear a song or an album that we were listening to in 2010, and it transports us back to that place. And so, you know, it's crickets, it's bullfrogs, you know, croaking by the lake. There are trains and airplanes flying overhead in places where I live. I feel like these sounds definitely make their way into my work in terms of, you know, in ways that are sometimes repetitive, in ways that are, you know, signaling some kind of alarm or danger, and even the silence in these places, you know, plays a role in how I place a secure or how I use silence in my breath when I'm reading. Yeah, so those sounds definitely inform the work in those ways.
Fantastic. So I just was alerted that I have been ignoring the Q&A box. And so there's a couple of questions that landed in there that I was unaware of. So do you mind?
Okay.
Like two more questions?
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So the first question, I think kind of pulls off from that last answer that you just gave really well. You talk about being interested in the way language falls apart in your poems, which is pretty clear in lines like "the most funkiest leaves me the most confusedest." It seems to me that while the language of your poems clearly evokes the Mississippi Delta, you do so without ever directly naming the Delta as the location inspiring that language. Can you say anything about the connection between these moments when your language falls apart and the Delta location that somehow contributes to the degradation of language into pure sound? Why does the Mississippi Delta lend itself to the collapse of language into pure sound?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think it's at least in part, you know, informed by musical traditions, informed by the blues tradition, which is informed by the gospel tradition, which is informed by your spiritual tradition, which is informed by the field holler, which is informed by the slave song. And in the Delta, you get all of these traditions, leaking from the soil. And for a young person in the Delta, these sounds, they stay with you in different ways. And so when I started playing in the band, we were playing blues songs, rock songs, R&B songs on these marching band instruments. And so the displacement of sound, hearing a song like Happy Feeling by Frankie Beverly and Mays through a 200-piece marching band is a lot different than hearing that same song from 5 guys on stage with guitars and drums, and so it amplifies it, it displaces it. I think in terms of the language falling apart, the Delta contributes to that in staggering ways, in ways that are informed by literacy rates in that part of the state, informed by the speech communities that we grew up in, that have their own ways of identifying objects or expressing wishes or concerns. And so, whenever I feel like it's probably home is probably my richest resource in that respect. Because every time I'm home, I'm paying much closer attention to the language than I ever had. And I'm jotting things down so that I don't forget, so that I do remember, so that, these things or these ways of speaking can be honored and be celebrated, and not looked at as simply, I don't know, bad English, or not giving it a negative tone. But
that is amazing. Okay, I've got 2 more quick questions if you're willing to answer those, and then just a comment. So Tyler Brewington asks, have you heard James Castle speaking to or through you yet? And what is he saying?
I don't know. So far what I've sort of flipped through and read and seen of Castle's work, I've sort of sat with the way he uses and displays and cuts and puts together and alters text. I think it's fascinating. He's doing some of the same things that I'm trying to do, not necessarily with a specific dialect or vernacular, but he sees language as a tool in similar way that I do, that can be manipulated in, I don't know what an English teacher might call a gross way, So I think there's that Castle has sort of revealed to me so far, and so I'm gonna stick with it and see what else comes.
We'll ask you again at the end of your stay.
Okay.
See if the answer is different. All right, and we've got a question from Kaylee Bartell. In the few weeks that you've been in residence so far, has the way you think about sound or language changed at all while in proximity to James Castle's work, who I imagine would have had a different relationship to sonic qualities.
Okay. So what do you think about some of the ways? Yeah, it's I think so far it's confirmed for me um the freedom I now feel to not have everything make grammatical sense and be linear. Um, I mean, even the way that I mean, Castle has he's got a few um, craft objects where he's using calendars, and sometimes the month has 35 days. Um, Sometimes the next month starts on the third, um, and so he's sort of, you know, blowing. He's reaffirming, I guess, the sort of train of thought that I came here on, and and that's that's been powerful to feel. It's been powerful to sit with and make alongside in this space, um, and so yeah. Um, I think that does that answer Kaylee's question.
I think so, yeah. If not, you know, she can email and ask.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I am not going to tell you every comment that was made. There was just blanket, you did a great job. Everyone is so grateful for you sharing with us tonight. I did want to
Yeah,
read
this was
a
fun.
comment because it kind of like, I feel like really hits a point that sums it up. This isn't a question. This is from Stephanie Inman. This isn't a question, but just a comment. I logged in at 6 p.m. feeling a little antsy for whatever reason, but being here listening, I somehow now feel more calm and grounded and at peace after this presentation. So thank you.
Oh, nice.
All right. Thank you again. Thanks for taking a little extra time to answer a few more questions. And
No, it
thanks
was
to
fun.
everyone for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. All right, bye.